Good afternoon. So today I'm here to present on a very famous solo of the bebop era. I think it goes a little bit overlooked in terms of the bebop style, but I found that it contains a lot of the elements that we use to describe bebop today, and that is Fats Navarro alongside the Tad Dameron septet playing Ladybird. So this was recorded on September 13th of 1948. The personnel on the track include Navarro on trumpet, Wardell Gray, and Alan Edgar on tenor sax, Tad Dameron on piano, Curly Russell on bass, and Kenny Clark on drums. I find it interesting to also note that Chano Pozo and Kenny Haygood were featured, Chano playing congos and Haygood singing on a few of the songs on this album. Um, This is the second recording in 1948, recorded by the Tad Dameron Sextet for Blue Note. So I'll start off by sharing my screen and just playing the recording along with the transcription. Let's see. Yeah, so to start, it's my first impressions of the solo is I assume that it was recorded later. On the Spotify album, it lists the album to be released as 57, which made sense to my ears because it kind of sounded like that later cool jazz kind of deal. I mean, stuff that Tad Dameron would be more associated with in the more modern recordings. But a few elements of this solo that I noticed to compare it to bebop innovators that we would commonly associate or think of when we think of a bebop solo. I usually think Dizzy or Miles. I think this is more on the Miles side. Um, I think that Fats Navarro really took the cleanliness of his improvisation very seriously, as we can hear. Very clean eighth notes, great articulation, very clear outlines of the chord changes. Um, there's a lot of stuff going on in the solo, as simple as it sounds. Navarro really had a I don't know any other words to use besides clear. Very punctual articulation and the way that he played through these chord changes. It sounds almost simple, but if we really dive into it, he's really doing some hip stuff. So to start, we're going to be on the left side of the screen. Now, I started off by the first thing we usually think of when we associate music with bebop is the chromaticism. Um, Starting off, he plays a very diatonic line with a few chromatic notes that aren't in the key conventionally. It's very straight ahead, clear eighth notes, outlining a few arpeggiations. But when we get into these couple of boxed things, you can see where he uses chromaticism to really land on chord tones. Like here, he starts on the fifth and goes down to the third, landing on a strong beat. Most of my analysis, um, from here on forward, I'm going to consider beats 1 and 3 the strong beats, because that's really where we want our um, chord tones to land, right? So starting off, it's just chromaticism from the 5 to the 3 chromatically. Up here, he starts on the 7th of the chord and goes down to the 5th chromatically. Um, in bar 10 going into 11, he ties his phrase through the chord changes, starting on A flat major, going to A flat minor or to A minor, which seem like far apart keys. There's a lot, not a, there's only a few chord tones in common. Um, Even here, he's kind of, I wouldn't say playing out. He starts on the 3rd of A flat major, which is shared in A minor, goes up chromatically to E flat. You can see that, oh, he didn't land on a conventional chord tone. Maybe if he was thinking a minor 2/5, but he speeds up the rhythm to go all the way up to the 6th, which is a common sound leading up to bebop. And then taking that line and transferring the shared note C in all three of these chords, he lands on the 3rd of A minor or the 7th of D major. We could even think of that as an anticipation. And finishes his phrase. So going down to measure 17, this is a widely carried on phrase. You could hear people like Nick Payton doing a phrase like this, starting on the 3rd, just like diatonically jumping down to the 7th, really outlining all the chord tones of that C major 7th. Um, Starts on the B natural, goes down chromatically to the A, finishes the phrase, going on to measure 22, starting on the 5th, chromatically all the way. This is a completely chromatic line. And you'll notice that I've, like, looking to the left hand of the screen, you can see that I've outlined that phrase a couple of times in my analysis. It's a really handy little thing to maneuver those chord changes. Starting on the 5th of B minor, going up chromatically to the 7th, tying it to the 3rd of E7, going up chromatically more, landing on the 5th of E7 to the root of B flat minor 7, up to the 3rd of B minor 7, or if he's anticipating the 7th of E flat 7. So there's a lot of chromaticism going on in very nuanced and specific places. Moving to the right hand of the screen, we can hear all the enclosures being used, and I'm pretty sure I've missed maybe one or two in my analysis, but the ones that I picked out are you can really hear. So in the blue, we're going to go through the diatonic enclosures. Starting on measure 1, going into 2, he is outlining that C major 9 sound for the most part. Navarro really liked using the 9s and the 11s, as you can see in this solo, but outlining between, this is kind of two enclosures in one, going from the C to the B. Well, maybe that's not an enclosure, but specifically, this is a 4-note enclosure offset, with the landing point being that C there. He approaches diatonically, a step up to a half step down, just enclosing the one diatonically. Here, going to the F minor 7, diatonically, or diatonically in terms of, yes, this is diatonic. The 3rd going to the 2nd, outlining that diatonically. There's another 4-note enclosure, diatonic to the 7th or the 4th of B flat. I think this could be interpreted as like a sus sound maybe, or just carrying that F minor over, maybe a late arrival. Here we see it again, diatonically to the 7th of G7 here. Going to bar 48, diaton. This is a 4-note enclosure. Here, this is diatonic, I would say, because he outlines generally B minor 7 going up to that E7, and uh, stepping up diatonically, da ba da da da, to that the 13th or the 6th of that minor chord, leading into the third of the E7. This is just a great phrase here. I won't take too much time. You can see there's a lot of diatonic enclosures in this. Now moving to the red boxes, these are all of the chromatic enclosures. It's a 4-note enclosure chromatically to the root of the F minor. A 3-note enclosure to the third of B flat 7. A 3-note um, to the fifth of A flat major. Same to the fifth of D7 down here. Yeah. So, I mean, I could go through and explain all these, but you can really see that he's using a lot of enclosures, diatonic and chromatic, which is very commonly found in bebop. I don't think anybody would argue that. Moving on to the next portion, I'm going to look at the arpeggiations and outlines. So this is kind of reminiscent of the past, and in a way, like his use of pentatonics throughout kind of make him sound more modern in a way, because pentatonics are something we associate with more of the hard bop or like fusion stuff. So there's a few times where he's just straight up playing F minor or just outlining with just a few notes and he makes the sound every time. So to start off, he just flat out outlines the F minor 7, or more so just an F minor sound. The 7 comes in following. Um, 2 notes is all you really need to make a sound. 5 and 3, and you know that we're an A flat major 7 or A flat major in general. Um, you can see all the red marks are the arpeggiations. Here's an inverted arpeggio. You can see him doing that in a couple places. Um, Now, the pentatonics that I marked are really interesting because it's almost a way to push forward to the next sound. Um, and bar 6 here, he uses a pentatonic, this 1 3 5 or 1 2 3 5, straight up a half step to the B flat minor, and he lands on the 7th, which is a good note to as a landing board to make that sound. Here we see it again in measure 16, just flat out making the A flat sound. Um, Here in measure 28, the blue box down here, I called this an outline because I would assume that with that sound, he's kind of thinking A minor for a lot of this. Um, and we can incorporate, or we can think of that as him just playing A minor all around. But here, I might even call that a sus sound, because in this measure, there's no third, just sevenths, ninths, 11s, and even some altered tones over here. Like it's kind of ambiguous to the sound being made here. So I it's kind of hard to explain, but I just felt the need to outline this. And then back here we see a pentatonic backwards, 5 3 2 1. It's easy to overlook that because it's not the conventional da ba do dum. Um, Now, moving on to the harmonic implications and the extension landing points. So, I found that Navarro tended to start phrases on the fifth, ninth, and seventh. There's a couple places where he starts on the third, like looking over here on measure 10 on the right hand side here. He starts his phrase in A flat major 7 and on the third. And there's a few other places where he does it. But more so than not, like measure 1, starting on the C major 7, he starts on that 5. Um, the let's see, the B minor 7 down here, starting on that F sharp, it's 5. C major down here starts on the 5. And A flat down here, starting on the 5. So I think his tendency is to start his phrases on the 5 or the 1. And then looking at other starts of his phrases, such as this D minor 7 in measure 13, starting on, oh yeah, that's the third, sorry. Um, Starting on the seventh down here in this A minor seven sound, the E right here on the D major seven. That's what I was thinking up here. Um, really starting on the ninth. I think that would be a good way to, I don't know, generalize. That would be a point in generalizing some of Fats Navarro's playing. There's a few other solos like Boperation. He's really leans towards the nine to start his phrases, and then all over you can see where I've marked the landing points in blue. He really likes to toss the ninth around on strong beats. Um, Starting on measure two, the D over C major seven, measure three on the F minor seven, hits a nine on beat three, and you can see all these little nines dispersed through the solo. It's really interesting, and who knows if he really means to do it or if he's just thinking melodically, like playing scales or whatnot. You can see all the little places where he targets the 11th or the 13th, even the flat 13th down here. Um, Not a whole lot of sharp 11s in this solo, which could be commonly associated with that bebop, like playing off the extensions. I think they were in the recording session, or they were in the recording studio and they needed something solid. There's an alternate take of this solo on this album. It's actually the opening track where he plays a lot of the same material in this like more well-known recording. It's almost like we have assumed in the past that perhaps they wrote out solos. A lot of the phrases in the other alternate take are very similar. Um, Now, and as far as harmonic implications, um, the one thing that I found really interesting is in bars 7 and 8, this 2-5 back to, or this 2-5 to A flat minor, or A flat major, sorry. Um, he really outlines that chromatic 2-5 sound in a way. I mean, this isn't like on paper that I wouldn't say that this is the most convincing way to see a 2-5 in a short 2-5 in A. But I mean, coming off like that 13 sound, maybe he's just playing E over, he's generalizing that 2-5 as an E, and then landing on the fifth of E7, and then right down half step to B flat minor to E flat. I forgot to include the following 2-5 here, but I find it really interesting that he did this in the first chorus, and in the second chorus, the rhythm section definitely played a chromatic 2-5 to catch up with them because they were listening. That's the first interesting harmonic implication that I found, and more so than listening, by writing it down, I realized that he's doing a couple more things that I outlined. The D13 sound, that's a really interesting way to outline a five chord. Perhaps he was thinking a 13 sound, or I don't know. There's a couple of ways. I mean, I'm not a mind reader, so we could speculate on a couple of ways. I just thought that's an interesting little phrase for a D7. So I'm just gonna generalize that as a D13. Here he lands on the natural seventh. Definitely a minor major sound, that harmonic or melodic minor sound. Here's a good other use of a 13 sound. Or even thinking a 2-5 here. I didn't notate that, but like maybe he was even thinking D minor here, G7 flat 13 kind of deal here, going into that Ladybird turnaround where he just straight up plays the sounds like it's very simple and it works, just outlining each area or key center. Down here, he uses a common sharp nine sound. Starting on the fourth, going down to the sharp nine, root seventh, it really gets that B flat seven sharp nine sound around. And then here, it might be a little bit of a reach to call this a sharp five, but maybe it was just a muscle memory lick, but I really heard that as a half step interval between the G and A flat. So let's call that a sharp five. I think that would really show his harmonic um, and intelligence. I mean, I think this is a very interesting look here. And then here, like I said earlier, you could be generalizing this as A minor, but let's call that a D flat or D7 sus because he's just playing all over that. And then at the very last minute, creating an area of attention to go to a very understated motive right here. And then, as mentioned before, he just finishes the solo out. Interesting bebop. This sounds like bebop right here. Um, just catches each sound on the way out. So, with that being said, let's get back to yeah, share. All right. So, with that being said, this is a very underrated solo in the bebop tradition, I'd say. I mean, a lot of trumpet players are familiar with this because they had to transcribe it for juries, boards, whatever. I'll transcribe both takes of this as well as Boperation, Damaronia. There's some really good bebop material in those solos, and I think this is a very helpful solo in terms of bridging the gap between playing something like Miles to learn bebop. I'd say Fats Navarro, Roy Eldridge, kind of. That's kind of a shoe in. And then Dizzy, because a lot of young trumpet players can't just go straight to Dizzy because he's playing stuff that was impossible on the trumpet. So hopefully that was a good demonstration of Fats Navarro's genius in the um, bebop era. And thank you for listening.